wake up, it's time to be free. Wake up, was blind, now I see. Wake up, it's time to be me. Wake up, my mind is the key.
Wake up, it's time to be me. Wake up, my mind is the key.
So welcome, my name is Jullien Gordon, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Daily Jules, where I drop nuggets of wisdom to help you achieve more degrees of freedom. I don't care how many college degrees you have. The only degree that matters to me is your degree of freedom. I don't care how much money you make, because what really matters is actually how you make money. So this is our daily show to just share the gold that's in my mind. Like I always say, you have a gold mine. You are a gold mine, and you have a lot of wisdom inside you that needs to be shared and could benefit other people right now. And so this is my demonstration and me leading by example of sharing the wisdom that I have and the thoughts that I have about freedom. It's not all wisdom. Some of it's just new thinking, and maybe a new thought that I have causes you to think in a new way about your life. I think wisdom is actually tried and true thoughts, right? And so I can't actually call it wisdom yet, but they are nuggets that have helped me transform my life and move closer and closer towards freedom. Now, oftentimes when we talk about freedom, people immediately think financial freedom, but that's actually not the only type of freedom that there is. That's the one that people go to. And the reason people want money so much is because it is the most liquid form of energy that is out there beyond your physical body. And so you can take money and you can buy access to social capital. You can buy things with it, right? It's a form of energy that we believe if we just have enough of, that we'll be free. And the reality is that, you know, I coach millionaires and I know millionaires that don't feel free. And this is why it's really key to talk about what we're going to talk about today in this particular episode, which is really, how do you define freedom? Right? How do you define freedom? There's all kinds of brands out there of freedom, and there's passive income. There's working on the beach. There's not working at all. There's retiring early. There's winning the lotto. There is being debt free. There's owning multiple rental properties. There is just being a millionaire. Like, everybody has these different definitions. There's Black empowerment freedom, right? There's all these different brands of freedom, but the only brand of freedom that really matters is your brand of freedom. And we have to look at how we are designing our lives in an effort to be free, because actually in this game called life, it's not the person with the most money that wins. And that's kind of the trick. I think people have been duped into this idea that the game is the person with the most money wins. Now, money is helpful, right? And I want you to have abundance in that category of your life, but it is not the only thing that contributes to whether or not you are free. And so I want to talk about how people look at similar things, right? Two people can look at similar things, and one person find it actually binding and one person find it actually freeing. And the number one reason why a lot of people don't feel free, that's what I want to cover in today's episode. So I see some people joining us. Beautiful, beautiful. Say hello. Let me know that you're here and where you're at. And I want to jump right in. And I actually want to just pick some elements of life that people think, oh, if I get this, then I will be free. And I want to share how two people could look at that same thing and not feel free as a result of it. So the first thing I want to look at is a high-paying job, right? High-paying job. That's the number one thing. You know, we were taught, be good, get good grades, go to good school, and get a good job, right? And a good paying job. And that would guarantee freedom. But we have to ask ourselves, what are the pluses and minuses of a high paying job? You know, some of the pluses are you have more money, which is this somewhat liquid gold, but it's not even backed by gold, really, right? Which can give you the freedom to buy whatever you want sometimes. Like, sometimes you reach a point in life, and I know that I've reached it, where I make enough money where I don't really have any wants. So when like birthdays come or Christmas comes, my wife has a difficult time thinking about what to get me, because I don't really have any wants, because you reach a certain level. And there's research that shows that that level is about $75,000 for a household. And beyond that, there's just marginal happiness beyond that. But that's just research. It may not apply to you. Why? Because everybody has a different definition of freedom. everybody has a different definition of freedom. So some people are on this path of be good, get good grades, go to good school, get a good high paying job, and that high paying job is going to get you more liquid assets, and that you'll be able to do whatever you want with that. But then there's some people who look at a high paying job and they actually see it as slavery. Right. So there's one person who looks at it as like, oh, I'm going to be making a lot of money and then I can be able to do whatever I want to do and buy whatever I want. But then there's other people who look at a high paying job like slavery, because honestly, I actually look at it more along this line, unless you are with the right employer. Right. So the reason some people can see it like this is because in a lot of ways, a salary is actually worse than hourly pay. A salary is actually worse than hourly pay, because once we switch over to salary, now you're not getting paid for overtime or a time and a half. A lot of people who are still like on that hourly type situation, they can get time and a half for working beyond the 40-hour work week. But once you're on salary, no matter how many hours you work, whether you work 60, whether you work 40, you are still going to get the same amount. You're going to get the same amount. And sometimes when you switch to salary, an employer is kind of saying that, I'm taking responsibility for your life, but we know that that's really not true. And you end up just working. And when you actually when you realize that your average work week is actually 50 or 60 hours a week, and you divide that by the annual pay that you're supposed to be getting, you find that you're actually in the $20, $30 an hour range, right? As opposed to what you thought it was going to be if it was a traditional 40-hour work week, 50 weeks a year, which is 2,000 hours of work per year. So there's some people who are seeking a high-paying job as a form of freedom because they see it going to provide more liquid assets to them in the form of money. And there's some people who can look at it as slavery, right? And so, again, everybody looks at things that they're pursuing in terms of freedom differently. There's other people who look at, perhaps, let's say you do have a high-paying job and you can afford a nanny, right? There's some people who look at that as this is somebody, it's kind of like outsourcing parenting. And there's some people who are like, I need that because I'm so busy at this high paying job. Right. But then there's other people who look at that and like, look, the reason I'm here is for my kids. Right. I don't want to outsource my parenting to someone else. If granted, I have this quote unquote good paying job, if it's actually I'm actually working hard for my family, but work is the very same thing that's taking me away from my family. That doesn't make any sense. Right. And so I remember reading this article about the CEO of PIMCO, and the CEO of PIMCO, I forgot his name, but the story was that his 8-year-old daughter approached him one day with a letter of about 20 events in her life that she had missed. And PIMCO is like one of the world's best investing firms, and he was CEO. So he had dough. Right. And so his 8-year-old daughter actually approaches him with a letter of events in her life at the age of 8 that she remembered him missing as a result of work. And of course, at first he was like put off, right? Because here he is working hard and has accelerated and grown his career. And he's quote unquote doing it for his family. And yet he's missing out on important events in his daughter's life, right? I remember the scene in Breaking Bad where Eisenberg, he finally turned to his wife and he said, I did it for me. Right? The whole movie show of Breaking Bad was really about him having this disease and trying to make sure his family was set up upon his departure. And then he actually looked within and said, you know what? I didn't do this for that. That was kind of my justification, but I did this for me. And so we have to be really careful. We got to be really careful about this, right? Now, some people believe that real estate is going to get them to freedom. Buying that single family home. And there's people who see it as freeing them, and there's people who see it as bondage, right? There's people who live in tiny houses. There's people who are minimalists who actually like to rent, and because they don't want the bondage of a mortgage. And then there's people who still believe that a single family home is an asset when at the very best, it's a savings account. Right. And so this is where miseducation sometimes messes us up in the pursuit of freedom, because we think that this is actually going to free us. But in fact, it actually ties us to our employer for 30 years because we don't want to leave that high paying job and we got this high mortgage right? We don't want to leave this high paying job as a result. If I was an employer and I really didn't care about people, I would simply try to help all my employees get a 30-year mortgage that was a little bit more than they could afford. And I guarantee you my retention rates would go up. This is part of the reason buying a home is part of the reason why people stay stuck in jobs that they hate. Right. So this one is a very dangerous one, even though this is what the American dream tells you to do. Now, there's also rental property. Some people believe that rental properties will free them. And I have several rental properties. And guess what? There are things freeing about rental properties, and there are things that are binding about rental properties. I have a huge amount of mortgages. I got a huge amount of mortgages because I'm early into those mortgages, right? So that's in a company, they would call that your burn rate, your overhead, right? That is actually going out and required to go out every month, whether or not my tenants actually pay. And so that's a burden that some people don't believe is free. And for them, their definition of freedom does not include having rental properties. But then there's people like me who actually see that as long as my rental income is greater than the burden of the debt and the time that I might have to manage and make calls and call plumbers and work with electricians and things of that nature, as long as that is great enough, right, then I'm happy to own this because this extra income that is being created for me actually is freeing me up to take more risk and actually just continue to live in my purpose, right? So these are some things that, people think are going to free them, but two people can look at it different ways because we all have a different definition of freedom. Now, the number one killer of freedom for a lot of people is actually comparison. Comparison. Because if I'm someone who actually doesn't believe in a high-paying job, right, as the actual way to freedom, don't believe in a nanny, but I believe in real estate and rental properties, but I'm comparing myself to someone who has this, and this, then I will always feel behind on my path to freedom. But if everybody has their own unique definition of freedom and we accept that as true, then guess what? There's nothing to compare to. There's nobody to compare to. This isn't a race that we are actually in, right? The only thing we are competing against is ourselves in this desire for freedom. And this is why I actually believe that we can all have freedom, that freedom isn't a zero-sum game where only some people can be free and some can't. And freedom isn't a game of whoever has the most money. Because I know a lot of people who have a lot of money who don't feel free. Right, because their cost of living, in part due to this, they got an increased salary, but their cost of living has risen with that salary. And your freedom is actually the difference between what you make and what you need to actually be happy. Your freedom is actually the difference between what you make and what you need to be happy. And the more you need to actually be happy and be at peace with yourself, the harder it is going to be free. And so this is really key to really look within yourself and ask, what is my unique brand of freedom? Not buying into society's definition of freedom. Of some people, for some people, travel, constant travel is a definition of freedom for them, right? And guess what? There are things that are great about that, and there are things that are binding about that. In some cases, you're going to meet great people along that journey. But those might be short-term relationships and not turning into long-term friendships. And then the minus is that, you miss out on somebody regularly being in your life. You miss out on the feeling of having home, a place to really call home, even though you have these small little homes all across the world. So again, all these things are perceived by different people in different ways. And you have to ask, is this freeing me based on my perception? Is this thing that I'm pursuing going to free me, or is it actually binding me, right? Even college, I can even throw college up here, right? This one is a question mark now. It used to be a clear plus, that it was more freeing to go to college than it was binding. But as the cost of college continues to rise, right? At some point, this is not going to be a good ROI. At some point, this will not be a good ROI. And then we have to ask ourselves, is this really freeing me? Like Wake Forest, I believe, and the reason I know this because my mentor works there, it's like $65,000 a year. And if you got no financial aid, right, you got loans, but you didn't get any support in terms of grants or scholarships, you're graduating with like $260,000 in debt. You're graduating $250,000 in debt at the age of 22. That could actually be more. Wake Forest is a great school, but if you go to the wrong school and where the price and the value don't match up, then you could end up being bound by going to college as opposed to being free. So this is really key to understanding how you define freedom, what freedom means to you, not to compare yourself to anyone else, right? And only pursue freedom according to what you believe is actually going to free you. And the final point I want to make is that you may think some of these things are going to free you, and you jump into them and realize immediately that they don't. And my challenge to you is the moment you realize that it's not going to free you, to turn away and start walking towards that which is going to free you. So this is Jullien Gordon with another episode of your Daily Jules, where I drop nuggets of wisdom to help you increase your degrees of freedom. I hope this episode has blessed you, and go get free right now. All right. Much love, everybody. Peace. I hope these mindsets, metaphors, and methodologies blessed you. If you desire more freedom, go to getfreenow.com to subscribe to the show on iTunes, YouTube, or Facebook, and get 4 of my best courses in the Freedom School for 100% free.